Luxury watch store employee dismisses. Keanu Reeves instantly regrets his snap judgment. Where are you watching this video from? Please comment and let us know. Also, don't forget to like the video and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. In the heart of Beverly Hills stood an opulent watch boutique, a haven for the elite. The walls were adorned with sleek, polished wood panels, and glass cases sparkled with watches that were more art than accessories. Each timepiece was meticulously crafted, carrying price tags that could rival luxury cars. The air smelled faintly of leather and subtle floral notes, a scent tailored to embody sophistication. Behind the counter stood Ethan, a young, ambitious salesperson. With his tailored suit and air of confidence, he prided himself on his ability to size up customers at a glance. To Ethan, every interaction was a calculation: who looked like they belonged and who did not. His track record in selling high-ticket items bolstered his belief that he could spot a serious beer the moment they walked through the door. It was a quiet afternoon when the glass door swung open, and the chime announced the arrival of a new customer. Ethan glanced up from his display adjustments and immediately noted the man entering. He was tall, with long, slightly unkempt hair tied back loosely. A simple black t-shirt, faded jeans, and well-worn boots completed his understated look. There was no designer logo in sight. Ethan's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Probably just browsing, he thought, already turning his focus back to the case he was arranging. The man walked in slowly, his posture relaxed and his gaze curious as he took in the displays. There was a quiet humility about him, an unassuming demeanor that almost made him blend into the background of the glamorous store. The man stopped in front of a case, showcasing a platinum watch encrusted with diamonds. He leaned in slightly, studying the piece with genuine interest. Ethan, noticing this, felt a flicker of annoyance. Surely this guy couldn't be serious about purchasing a watch like that. But even in that fleeting moment, there was something about the man's presence that was hard to ignore. He exuded a quiet charisma, the kind that hinted at stories untold. Ethan, however, was too preoccupied with his assumptions to notice. He adjusted his tie and prepared to approach, already rehearsing the words he would use to subtly redirect the man to more affordable options or perhaps to the door. Little did Ethan know, this moment would soon turn into a lesson he'd never forget. Keanu Reeves stood quietly in front of the display, his gaze lingering on a stunning platinum watch. Its intricate design and sparkling diamonds seemed to capture his attention as if he were appreciating a piece of art rather than considering a purchase. His fingers rested lightly on the edge of the glass, and his expression was thoughtful, almost contemplative. Ethan, however, observed the scene from behind the counter with growing skepticism. "What's he doing?" he muttered under his breath, his polished shoes clicking against the floor as he approached. To Ethan, this wasn't the look of a beer, it was the look of someone out of their depth. Clearing his throat loudly, Ethan interrupted Keanu's quiet moment. "Excuse me, sir," he began, his tone polite but clipped. "I just want to point out that the pieces in this section are quite exclusive." Keanu turned toward him, his calm face breaking into a small smile. "They're beautiful," he said simply, gesturing toward the watch. "I was wondering if I could see that one up close." Ethan hesitated, his eyes scanning Keanu's plain attire once again. With a practiced expression of apology, he replied, "Well, these models are not exactly entry-level. Perhaps I could direct you to some other options." He gestured vaguely toward a less prominent section of the store. Keanu blinked, momentarily surprised. "I understand," he said, still polite, "but I'd really like to see that one. It's caught my eye." Ethan sighed internally, feeling as though his time was being wasted. "Sir," he said, a little more firmly now, "this watch costs more than most people make in a year. I wouldn't want to waste your time or ours." For a moment, Keanu seemed taken aback. He hesitated, as though trying to find the right words to address the situation. "I appreciate that," he said carefully, "but I'm genuinely interested in." Ethan cut him off with a raised hand and a forced smile. "Look, let me be honest with you," he said. "We cater to a very specific clientele here. If you're not looking to make a purchase today, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The words hung in the air, heavy with discomfort. For a brief moment, the boutique fell silent except for the faint ticking of a nearby clock. Keanu's polite smile faltered, replaced by a quiet look of disappointment. Without arguing or causing a scene, Keanu nodded. Understood, he said softly, his voice steady but tinged with sadness. Thank you for your time. He turned and walked toward the door, his boots making muted sounds against the marble floor. As the glass door closed behind him, Ethan felt a fleeting pang of unease. He brushed it off quickly, confident he had made the right call. Little did Ethan know, the man he had just dismissed so casually was about to teach him a lesson that would change the course of his day, and perhaps his outlook on life forever. Ethan returned to his place behind the counter, his steps brisk and his posture confident. He felt no need to dwell on the man he had just dismissed. After all, this was an exclusive boutique, and not everyone could be accommodated. As he rearranged a display case, a woman in her 40s, dressed in an elegant blouse and carrying a designer bag, approached the counter. Her expression was a mix of disbelief and irritation. "Excuse me," she began sharply. Ethan straightened up, immediately adopting his professional demeanor. "Yes, ma'am. How can I assist you?" The woman frowned, gesturing toward the door where Keanu had exited moments earlier. "Do you have any idea who that was?" Ethan blinked, slightly taken aback. "I'm sorry. That man you just sent away," she said, her voice tinged with exasperation. "That was Keanu Reeves." For a moment, Ethan's mind went blank. He stared at her, trying to process the name. "Keanu Reeves, the actor." "Yes," the woman replied, crossing her arms. "The Keanu Reeves. You know, the Hollywood star. The man who's known for being one of the kindest, most generous people in the industry." Ethan's chest tightened as the realization began to sink in. He glanced at the door, as if expecting Keanu to walk back in. The woman wasn't finished. "He's one of the most humble celebrities you'll ever meet. I've read countless stories about him taking public transportation, helping strangers, and donating millions to charity. And you," she paused, shaking her head in disbelief, "you treated him like he didn't belong here." Ethan's face turned pale. He could feel a knot forming in his stomach. As the gravity of his actions began to settle, he replayed the encounter in his mind, now seeing it in a completely different light. The casual clothing, the quiet demeanor, these weren't signs of someone who didn't belong. They were signs of someone who didn't need to flaunt their wealth or status. I didn't realize," Ethan stammered, his voice weak. "I didn't know it was him." The woman gave him a pointed look. "That's the problem," she said. "You shouldn't have treated anyone that way, celebrity or not." Ethan felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him. The truth of her words stung, and the weight of his mistake pressed down on him. Not only had he been rude to a customer, but he had also insulted one of the most admired figures in the world. He glanced around the store, suddenly aware of the judgmental stares from other customers who had witnessed the incident. His confidence and pride, once unshakable, now felt hollow and misplaced. I need to fix this," Ethan muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. But the question lingered in his mind. Would he even get the chance? Ethan was still reeling from the woman's scolding when the chime of the door startled him. He looked up and froze. Keanu Reeves was walking back into the store, but this time he wasn't alone. Beside him was a sharply dressed man in his 50s, exuding authority and confidence. Ethan recognized him immediately. Mr. Henderson, the regional director of the luxury brand. His tailored suit and commanding presence made him a frequent topic of conversation among the staff. Ethan felt his heart drop. The pair walked in, their conversation relaxed but animated. Keanu seemed unaffected by the earlier incident, his demeanor as calm and humble as before. Mr. Henderson, however, wore a broad smile, and his voice carried across the store as he greeted Keanu like an old friend. "Keanu, it's been too long," Mr. Henderson said warmly, shaking his hand. "How have you been?" Keanu returned the handshake with a slight smile. "I've been good, thanks. Just back in town for a bit and thought I'd stop by." The exchange was casual, as though they were catching up after years of camaraderie. Ethan's chest tightened. Not only had he dismissed a Hollywood star, but it was now clear Keanu had a personal relationship with one of the most influential figures in the company. Mr. Henderson turned, his eyes scanning the store before landing on Ethan. The smile faded from his face. "Ethan," he said, his tone measured, "is everything all right here?" Ethan felt his throat go dry. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His earlier confidence had evaporated completely. Keanu, noticing Ethan's discomfort, spoke up. "It's fine," he said kindly, his voice soft. "We had a little misunderstanding earlier." No hard feelings. The graciousness in Keanu's tone only deepened Ethan's shame. He glanced at Mr. Henderson, whose expression had turned into a frown. A misunderstanding, the director repeated, his voice carrying a hint of disapproval. Keanu nodded. I think he was just doing his job, looking out for the store. Ethan wanted to disappear. Keanu's humility and refusal to escalate the situation made him feel even worse about his earlier behavior. Well, Mr. Henderson said, his tone turning brisk, I'm glad Keanu came back. Ethan, let's make sure he gets the best experience possible this time. Of course, sir, Ethan stammered, bowing his head. He felt the weight of Mr. Henderson's gaze before it shifted back to Keanu. Keanu, the director continued, his tone softening, please take your time. If there's anything you'd like to see, don't hesitate to let me know personally. Keanu smiled, his easy demeanor never faltering. Thanks, but I've already decided. I'll take the platinum one I was looking at earlier. Ethan's stomach churned. That was one of the most expensive pieces in the store. His snap judgment about Keanu's worth had been not only wrong but entirely unjustified. As the sale was processed and Mr. Henderson continued to chat with Keanu, Ethan remained silent, standing awkwardly to the side. He could feel his face burning with embarrassment. The lesson was clear, appearances could be deceiving, and he had allowed his assumptions to cloud his judgment. When Keanu left the store, watch in hand, Ethan was left with a lingering sense of regret, not only for the potential commission he'd missed but for how his own prejudices had betrayed him. As the transaction concluded, the boutique was filled with an air of quiet awe. Keanu Reeves, the humble Hollywood star, stood at the counter with the store's most extravagant timepiece, now carefully packed in its elegant box. Mr. Henderson beamed with pride, shaking Keanu's hand warmly. Thank you for your continued loyalty. Keanu, it's always a pleasure having you here. Keanu returned the handshake, his trademark modest smile never wavering. Thank you for your help, he replied. His voice was calm and genuine, carrying none of the bitterness one might expect after the earlier encounter. As he turned to leave, Keanu paused and glanced at Ethan, who stood awkwardly to the side, visibly uncomfortable. Keanu's eyes held no anger, only understanding. With a slight tilt of his head, he smiled warmly at the young employee. You know, Keanu began, his voice gentle but purposeful. It's not always about how someone looks. Sometimes, the person you least expect might surprise you. Ethan swallowed hard, feeling the weight of Keanu's words. His face flushed as he managed to stammer, I'm so sorry, Mr. Reeves, I shouldn't have. Keanu raised a hand, cutting him off not out of dismissal but reassurance. It's okay, he said softly. We all make mistakes. The important thing is to learn from them. With that, Keanu gave a small nod, his easygoing smile lingering as he walked toward the door. The store fell silent as the glass door swung shut behind him, leaving Ethan and the other employees frozen in a mix of awe and self-reflection. Ethan exhaled slowly, his earlier pride now replaced with humility. Keanu's words echoed in his mind, a subtle yet powerful reminder to never judge someone by appearances. The lesson wasn't lost on the young employee, who silently vowed to approach his job and people with a newfound sense of respect and openness. For years to come, he would remember that day, not just for the celebrity encounter but for the invaluable lesson in humanity and kindness delivered with grace by one of the most unassuming, yet remarkable men he had ever met. As the store settled back into its usual quiet hum, Ethan stood behind the counter, still replaying the encounter in his mind. He felt embarrassed, yes, but more than that, he felt introspective. Keanu Reeves had every reason to call him out, to be angry or demand an apology in front of everyone. Yet, he hadn't. Instead, Keanu had handled the situation with grace, offering kindness where frustration would have been justified. Ethan sighed and looked around the store. The polished floors, glittering glass cases, and sleek furniture that once gave him a sense of superiority now felt hollow. He realized how often he had let appearances guide his interactions, assuming that wealth and status were defined by what someone wore or how they carried themselves. Keanu's words rang in his ears. It's not always about how someone looks. The lesson cut deeper than any reprimand could have. Ethan promised himself he would never make that mistake again. He resolved to treat every customer, every person with respect and dignity, no matter their outward appearance. The other employees, who had watched the entire incident unfold, also seemed affected. Quiet conversations filled the air, and a subtle shift in the store's atmosphere was palpable. Even the most seasoned among them seemed to recognize the need for a change. In the days that followed, Ethan made an effort to be more mindful, engaging with every customer sincerely and without preconceived notions. It wasn't just about being a better salesperson, it was about being a better person. As for Keanu Reeves, his humility and kindness became a source of inspiration not only for Ethan, but for everyone in the store who had witnessed his actions. The story of his visit spread among the staff, becoming a kind of legend that they shared with new hires. It served as a reminder of the power of grace and the importance of treating everyone with respect, regardless of who they appeared to be. Ethan often thought about that day, and how a man who could have used his fame to demand anything instead chose to teach a lesson in the simplest, most impactful way possible. In the end, it wasn't Keanu's celebrity status that left the deepest impression, it was his humanity.